time frame of all of this. It's a bit weird until you do it once. I've held off ever putting an FOI and I felt really guilty, and I still feel slightly guilty every time. But on day one, basically, day zero, you ask, and the clock starts the next morning. So basically, it's kind of, the legislation kind of thinks about everybody wakes up in the morning and looks at their inbox, and that was their chance to actually start the clock to say they've received it and they can do something about it. So they kind of have about a half-day lead time. And from then, basically, they have up to 20 days to reply with those 2 bits of information. Do they hold it and give you the information? Now, it is notable that the legislation says it's promptly, but no later than 20 days. And you'll be surprised at the number of things that come back into your inbox at 6 o'clock on the 20th day. And magically, the 3-line reply saying no has taken them a whole 20 days to produce. It's really weird. So some organisations actually reply within about 3 days, and they're the ones that you can tell are delighted to tell you. They're really glad somebody's engaging with you. You can ask for people to acknowledge the fact that you asked them something, because you don't have to actually send it to any particular address. As long as you send it by letter or email to anybody in the organisation, that day, the next morning is day one. So you don't have to send it to FOI@organisation.org. You know. So it's quite random. Things can get missed to people on holidays and stuff. So it is quite nice to say when you tell me it's there. They don't have to. They can ignore that bit. They can wait no later than 20 days to come back just with the answer. So don't be surprised. It is a bit like wasting 20 days of your life, this. The first couple of times it will go wrong. If they refuse to provide the information, the really good thing is they have to properly explain why. So they've got to actually say, some of the common reasons are things like, it's accessible by other means. So if you ask for some minutes or for some information, and they say, you know what, it's in the annual report, it's on the website, go away. They just have to tell you, it's already there, here's where it is. They can also tell you that we've already got a plan to produce it. So in which case, they don't have to give it to you now. They don't have to accelerate existing plans. However, they can't say, oh, well, that's a really good idea. We never thought about that. I think we'll produce it in 6 months' time. That doesn't count because they haven't already got a plan, so they're tied to 20 days. So you do need to be careful to see how they word things when they come back, because some of them will play games with this, Paul.
Do they have to show where the plan is? Do they have to say, we have a plan, here's proof that we've got a plan in our plan documents, or can they just say, oh, well?
I don't think it goes into that. I think but they have to be convincing with their explanation. They do have to give an explanation to say, they have to back up why they would use any of the exemptions. Effectively, there's about 30 exemptions kind of built into the legislation. There's a whole pile of things about national security, and there's one we'll come across with Translink about commercial interest. So if you think it would actually damage sales and stuff, you can kind of say, which for some public organisations like Translink, the local kind of bus and train companies, that is, they are commercial as well as being publicly funded. So they're kind of quite a lot.
You send out a question and ask for a copy of the plan.
You could. 20 days later.
If you think they're messing around.
Yeah. So most organisations offer a thing called an internal review, which means you can't complain to the ICO until you've been through the review process. Guess what? Day 0, day 1, day 20. And the only thing is basically it gets looked again by somebody who's independent. So somebody who didn't look at it before, usually their boss. So there's a bit of a kind of an interest in this. They look at it and will come back with an explanation, and you can challenge them to say that they didn't actually specify which section of the Act or which subsection of the Act they're actually relying on. So if they say it's not in our commercial interest to do this, they're meant to actually then say why and so on. They're also meant to say, apply like a public interest test to say, might not be in our commercial interest. And we've thought about this, and on balance, we could give it to you, but it would damage us this way, and we could not give it to you, and we would benefit this way, on balance. So they have to actually construct an argument, and the Translink guys kind of find that. After that, you can complain, but you may be wasting your time because there's about a 2-year waiting list of complaints. So it's better to try and work with the organisation and develop a relationship. So the guys in Belfast all asked Translink for basically information about where bus stops were, the timetables, and for GPS information about where the buses are, because they all have trackers on them. And they got back an email reply. I think it probably took about 20 days to come back. And it was written by somebody who's pretty good. When it had a lawyer who'd written it, and it had all kinds of stuff. So probably the first one probably triggered the thing. If they get multiple requests, they can actually bulk them up. If they get a vexatious request, in other words, if they think you're just trying to irritate them and you keep asking the same thing, they can ignore it and basically just come back and say, you're a nutter, please don't. It's fair enough, from their point of view, you can see
They
why.
can stop you for 6 months.
Sorry?
They can give you the label of unreasonably persistent complainant
Yes.
and actually stop you from putting an FOI request in for 6 months.
So you kind of stop your
Yeah, but there's a legal principle of frivolous and vexatious, but you can challenge that through the Commissioner.
Yeah.
You can. They can also come back, as you just said, and say if it costs more than £450 or £600 for a central government, they can say we can't do it. In which case you should split your questions into bits and say that each one of them is a separate thing, and then they have to apply the test to see. It's fair enough. I don't want my taxes spent on frivolous requests from other people. I just want it spent on my frivolous request. Did I say that? So what came back from on the left-hand side from, they basically said that some of the stuff, basically it's scheduled, the stuff is already going to be published through Open Data in the future. And so they said section 22, which is the information intended for public, for future publication, applied. And you know what, that's pretty unchallengeable. There was a plan, we knew there was, you kind of knew there was a plan in the background to happen, but that's how it comes back. They've got a quote, it's number 22, and you can go onto the ICO website and find 22 things. It's getting a bit small if you're at the back, but...
Sorry, Alan, just going back on the last one. You
Yeah.
say intended for publication. What time scale? Is it intended for publication?
Doesn't matter.
Intended for publishing in 10 years' time?
I think that's okay. If it's a proper plan, they already were planning to get towards that one. Don't think it specifies. There may be I don't think there's a public interest test for that bit. Somebody will need to check. But so for a lot of the exemptions, they're meant to. It's not a blanket thing. It's qualified, so they must think about why they would actually want to apply it. But for some of them, they can just say it fits the thing. It's funding legislation. So the next one was basically saying the Ulster Bus service data wanting it to be available in a format and stuff. They basically kind of came back and said it wasn't in their commercial interest. This is one of the qualified ones. There's kind of second, third paragraphs. They had to do this whole thing about saying we consider the wider public interest, the release of the balance, it will have a negative impact because the data quality is rubbish, and actually we'd like to resolve that internally before we do it. So they kind of came back with an argument to say it would be worse for the customers to have bad information than to have no information. And there's a certain accuracy to that you can kind of believe that would make sense. The last bit that I picked out was you'd asked for kind of GPS tracking information from buses, and they came back with a kind of nice curveball that said, you know what, the bus track thing was put in by DRD Road Service, it's nothing to do with us, mate, and all the IPs owned by them. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that really means we should probably put exactly the same request into Road Service and see what excuse they'll come up with. Bet you it's about Translink commercial stuff, and there'll be some kind of circular argument that go on for a month or two, but that'd be worth looking at that. But those are just examples from a real thing, something you know about, and how they justify it.